Brayden Wells was elbow-deep in a broken coffee grinder when the soft jingle of the bell above the shop door made him glance up then freeze. It was 6:30 in the morning. He wasn't supposed to open for another hour, but the woman standing in the doorway looked like she hadn't slept all night. Her heels clicked softly against the tile, and her coat was draped over one arm, like she'd just escaped a boardroom or a gala, or maybe both. "I'm sorry," Brayden called, wiping his hands on a towel and stepping away from the counter. "I'm not open yet, I know," she interrupted, her eyes locking with his. They were sharp, blue, intense. "I saw your light on. I really needed coffee. I can pay double." Brayden hesitated. She didn't look like the usual early risers that sometimes wandered in before hours. This woman looked expensive. Like she didn't belong in a rundown corner cafe with a flickering neon sign and a hand-painted chalkboard menu. But he glanced at the small photo taped behind the counter. His 5-year-old daughter, Kinsey, grinning wide with a missing front tooth. He couldn't afford to turn away paying customers. Not today. Not with rent due. "All right," he said, flipping the lock open. "Come in. I'll brew you a fresh pot." Her shoulders dropped slightly, like she hadn't expected him to say yes. Her lips curved, and for the first time he noticed how stunning she was. Not just pretty, but the kind of beautiful that made you forget what you were doing. "Thank you," she said, slipping into the seat by the window. "I'm Callie Carrington." He nodded, already dumping beans into the grinder. Brayden Wells." The grinder screeched to life, and he missed the way her eyes lingered on him. The coffee shop was nothing fancy, just a few small tables, a chipped counter, and a pastry case that hadn't been refilled in 2 days. But Brayden moved through it like it mattered. Like it was his. Because it was. He handed her a steaming cup a few minutes later, and she wrapped her hands around it like it was the first warmth she'd felt in hours. "This place is yours?" she asked, looking around. "Yeah," he said. "Bought it 2 years ago. Thought it'd be a good way to build something for my daughter. It's not easy." Callie looked at him. Really looked. Her voice softened. "You're a single dad?" "Yeah. Kinsey's 5. She's the best thing in my life." He smiled, a little embarrassed. "She's probably still snoring like a tiny bear. My friend across the hall watches her in the mornings." Callie sipped her coffee, watching him over the rim of the cup. "You always open early for strangers?" "Only the ones who look like they haven't had a break in a while." She smiled at that, and it hit him like a truck. He looked away quickly, pretending to clean the espresso machine. The rest of the morning passed in a strange kind of quiet. Callie didn't rush out. Instead, she sat by the window, sipping slowly, watching the sun rise over the buildings outside. Brayden worked around her, watching from the corner of his eye when he thought she wouldn't notice. But she noticed everything. When she finally stood to leave, she slipped a $100 bill under her cup. "Hey," Brayden called, catching it. "This is way too much." She shrugged, pulling her coat back on with a soft smile. "Consider it a thank you. For the coffee. And the kindness." He watched her walk out the door, the bell jingling again behind her. He didn't expect to see her again. But she came back the next morning. And the morning after that. Every day, without fail, she showed up just before 7, always dressed like she'd just stepped off a runway or out of a boardroom. And every morning, Brayden opened the shop early without saying a word. Just flipped the lock, brewed the coffee, and slid her cup across the counter like it was the most natural thing in the world. They talked more each day. About everything and nothing. Her job, consulting, she'd said at first, vague and distant. His daughter, who loved unicorn cereal and had recently decided she wanted to be a firefighter ballerina. The shop. Life. Regrets. Callie listened like no one ever had. And Brayden. He found himself waiting for her, watching the door every morning like some teenager with a crush. She never talked about her world. Not really. But every now and then, it slipped through. The private driver waiting outside. The sleek black car with tinted windows. The way she once answered a call and said, "Tell the board I'll be there in 30. He didn't ask questions. He figured she liked the quiet of his world more than the noise of her own. One morning, 2 weeks after their first meeting, she showed up later than usual. Her heels were gone, and she wore flat boots and a sweater. Her hair was pulled back. She looked softer, sadder. "You okay?" he asked, pouring her usual. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Rough day. Rough life," she muttered. Brayden handed her the mug. "Sit. I'll make you something sweet." On the house. She didn't argue. He warmed a cinnamon roll she probably didn't need and slid it in front of her. She stared at it for a second before smiling. You always this nice to strangers? You're not a stranger anymore, he said. She looked up at him, and something passed between them, something unspoken but heavy. You're a good man, Brayden, she said quietly. Your daughter's lucky. He swallowed hard. I'm the lucky one. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small box. For Kenzie, she said. I saw it and thought of her. He opened the box to find a tiny silver charm bracelet with a unicorn dangling from the middle. His throat tightened. Callie, this is too much. She shook her head. It's not. Just tell her it's from a friend. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time realized she wasn't just beautiful. She was hiding something, and whatever it was big. But before he could ask, the bell above the door jingled again, and she was gone. All that remained was the bracelet in his hand, and the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. And Brayden? He was already in trouble, because he wasn't just waiting for her anymore. He was falling. Brayden stepped onto the sidewalk, tugging his coat tighter against the late March wind. The sun was just starting to rise, casting a pale glow over the neighborhood. Across the street, the bakery hadn't opened yet. The florist was still dark, but his phone buzzed in his pocket, a reminder that the delivery truck was running late again. He glanced up the block instinctively, even though he hadn't seen her in 2 days. Callie. She'd vanished as suddenly as she'd appeared, and even though he told himself not to care, he'd caught himself checking the door every morning. No texts, no calls. Not that she'd given him a number. Just a name and 1,000 questions he hadn't asked. Inside the cafe, the scent of roasted beans and vanilla lingered in the air. Kenzie's drawing from last night still sat on the counter, a crayon unicorn with sparkles glued to the mane. He adjusted it so it wouldn't fall, then turned toward the back, stacking the new boxes of cups delivered yesterday. The bell jingled. His heart jumped. But it wasn't her. It was a man in a sharp navy coat, tailored to the point of perfection. He paused at the entrance, eyes scanning the interior like he was expecting something better. This isn't a mistake, the man said, stepping closer. You're Brayden Wells? Brayden nodded slowly, wiping his hands on a towel. Can I help you? The man extended a card. Heavy stock. Embossed. I'm Julian Mercer, executive assistant to Callie Carrington of Carrington Holdings. Brayden blinked. I'm sorry, Callie who? Julian gave a tight smile. Miss Carrington. You know her as Callie. Brayden's fingers tightened around the towel. She all right? She's fine. But she asked me to come by on her behalf. She regrets not being able to return in person. Brayden's jaw tensed. Why can't she? Julian glanced around, then lowered his voice. Miss Carrington is in the middle of a high-profile acquisition, very sensitive. Media's gotten wind of things, and she's under heavy scrutiny. She needed to step back from any public outings that might draw attention. Brayden stared at him. This isn't a public outing. It's a coffee shop. Julian hesitated. To you, maybe. But Miss Carrington's presence here was noticed. There were photos. A few blogs picked it up. She's trying to protect your privacy, as well as her own. Photos? Brayden's hand dropped to the counter. She's a billionaire? Julian didn't answer. He didn't need to. She didn't tell me, Brayden said quietly. No, Julian said. She didn't. He left a small envelope on the counter and turned to leave. She asked me to give you this. Brayden didn't open it until the man had disappeared down the block. Inside was a single note in delicate handwriting. I'm sorry for disappearing. I never lied to you, but I didn't tell you everything. I needed something real, and for a while, I had it. I hope you and Kenzie are safe and happy. See nothing else. No number. No way to reach her. Just a few lines that didn't explain anything. He folded the note and slid it into his pocket, then unlocked the front door and flipped the sign to open. The next few days passed in a blur. He buried himself in work, early mornings, late closings, extra deliveries. He painted the back wall of the cafe with Kenzie one afternoon just to keep his hands busy. Customers came and went, but none of them had blue eyes or wore perfume that made the air shift around them. Kenzie noticed. Why are you sad? She asked one night, scooping macaroni onto her plate. I'm not, he said. You are, she replied. You don't look up when the door opens anymore. He didn't know what to say to that. That Friday, he closed early. He couldn't take the silence anymore. Not the kind that crept in after hours, when the shop was clean and the chairs were flipped and the world outside was still moving but she wasn't in it. He took Kinsey to the park, let her chase pigeons and climb the jungle gym twice. She made a daisy chain for her unicorn bracelet, and he tried not to think about the woman who gave it to her. That night, after putting Kinsey to bed, he poured himself a drink and stared at the envelope again. It didn't make sense. She'd come every day, sat in the same spot, shared stories, laughed with him, given his daughter a gift she hadn't let out of her sight since. And now she was gone like it hadn't meant anything. The next morning, he opened the cafe at the usual time. The world didn't stop turning, but everything felt off. Until, at exactly 7:23, a sleek black car pulled up outside. Brayden froze. The back door opened. Callie stepped out. Gone were the heels. Her hair was pulled into a low bun, and she wore jeans and a pale gray sweater. But her expression, her expression held the same fire as the day she'd first walked in. He didn't move. She opened the door herself. No security, no assistant, just her. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice quiet. "I shouldn't have sent Julian. That was cowardly." Brayden didn't speak. "I didn't want to be found," she continued. "Not because I was hiding from you. Because I didn't want you to see me as her. The woman in the magazines. The one with an empire and lawyers and more money than she knows what to do with." "You're saying that like it's a bad thing," he said. She stepped closer. "It is. When the only people who want to be near you are the ones who want something from you." He looked at her. Really looked. "You think I wanted something?" "No," she said. "That's why I came here." He folded his arms. "You should have told me." "I know." Her voice faltered. "I didn't think it would matter. Then I realized it mattered too much." He turned back toward the counter. "So why now?" "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you," she said. "Or Kinsey. Or how you make the best coffee I've ever had and don't even realize it." He stayed silent. "I've spent years surrounded by people who only say what they think I want to hear. You never did that. You never asked what I could do for you. You just gave." Brayden glanced at the photo behind the counter. She followed his gaze. "I was going to tell you. I was. But I didn't want to lose what we had." "You still might," he said. "I know," she whispered. The silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, he reached under the counter. He pulled out the bracelet. "She wears it every day," he said. "Says unicorns are lucky." Callie's eyes filled. "I don't care about your money," he said. "I care that you left without saying goodbye." "I didn't know how to say it." "You just say it," he murmured. She stepped closer. "Then let me say this. I want to know you. Without walls. Without lies. If you'll let me, I'll come back tomorrow. And the day after. And every day until you believe me." He didn't answer right away. But when he turned and poured her a fresh cup of coffee, sliding it across the counter without a word, she knew. He was letting her try. The following week shifted something between them, something fragile, but undeniably real. Callie didn't just return the next morning. She returned with a paper bag in one hand and a tentative smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Brayden unlocked the door before she knocked, and when she stepped inside, the silence between them felt less like a wall and more like a question. "I brought croissants," she said, placing the bag on the counter. "From a place in Midtown that thinks butter should be its own food group." Brayden arched a brow, wiping his hands on a towel. "You bribing your way back into my good graces?" "No," she said, opening the bag. "I'm bribing you into sitting down and letting me explain something." He hesitated, then nodded toward the corner table. She followed him, the paper bag between them like a peace offering. "I've only had one real relationship in my life," she said, tearing a croissant in half. He was older. Charming. Told me I was brilliant. I was 22 and thought I'd figured out the whole world. Brayden leaned back in his chair, watching her face. "He ran a hedge fund," she continued. "I thought we were building something together. He thought I was convenient. When I caught him with one of his analysts, I left. No drama. No confrontation. Just vanished." Brayden's voice was quiet. "Did it wreck you?" "No," she said. "It embarrassed me. I'd been so careful in every part of my life. Except that one. After that, I stopped letting anyone in." She picked at the edge of the pastry. "Then I walked into your cafe, and you looked at me like I was a person, not a portfolio." Brayden didn't respond right away. Then he said, "You ever think I might have my own reasons for being careful?" She looked up. "My ex left when Kinsey was 2, he said. Didn't stick around long enough to watch her outgrow diapers. Said she couldn't handle the responsibility. I haven't seen her since." Callie's throat bobbed. What does Kinsey think? She thinks her mom lives on a rocket ship and sends her good dreams. He smiled without humor. I haven't corrected her. Callie reached for her coffee. You're doing more than most would. Doesn't always feel like it, he said. They were quiet for a while, the city humming faintly outside the window. Then she said, I want to do something for you. For Kinsey. Brayden straightened. You buying me a yacht? No, she said, but I want to invest in this place. He tilted his head. You mean a loan? I mean renovations. Equipment. Marketing. A proper website. Maybe a corner for kids so Kinsey has a space when she's here. He stared at her. You don't owe me anything. I know, she said. That's why I want to. He shook his head slowly. Callie, this cafe is all I have. If I take your money, it changes everything. No, she said. It doesn't. It's still yours. I just want to give you the room to breathe. He stood, pacing toward the counter. You don't get it. I've had to fight for every inch of this place. I've scrubbed grease off these floors at midnight and built shelves with my bare hands because I couldn't afford a contractor. If something breaks, I fix it. If I run out of beans, I go without sleep to restock before opening. I've done all of it alone. She stood too. You're not alone now. He turned, his voice rough. I don't want to be your charity project. That's not what this is, she said. Brayden, I don't want to change you. I want to support you. There's a difference. He exhaled, the tension in his shoulders refusing to leave. She stepped closer. Look, I know this is a lot. I dropped into your world like a meteor and then vanished without warning. But I'm not asking you to give up control. I'm asking for a chance. To be part of it. He watched her for a long moment. Then, Kinsey's birthday is in 3 weeks. I was going to make cupcakes and let her host a tea party in the back room. Callie's face softened. Let me help. He didn't agree. But he didn't say no either. By the time the croissants were gone, and the cafe began to fill with regulars, she was behind the counter helping him restock napkins like she'd always belonged there. That night, after Kinsey's bath, Brayden sat on the floor with her while she lined up her stuffed animals. Daddy, she said, do unicorns get tired? Only if they've had a busy day, he said, brushing her damp hair. She looked up. Can I invite Callie to my party? He hesitated. Only if she wants to come, Kinsey added quickly. I don't want to make her. He ruffled her hair. I think she'd like that. The next day, Callie returned after closing. She didn't wear a sweater this time. She wore a navy jumpsuit that belonged on a runway and carried a bag that probably cost more than Brayden's monthly rent. But she walked in like none of that mattered. I got her a book, she said, pulling it out. It's about a unicorn who becomes a firefighter. He laughed. You're going to make me look bad. That's my goal, she said lightly. But I also wanted to talk. He nodded toward the stools at the counter. She's Saturday. I told my board I'm taking a leave. He blinked. Why? Because I need to figure out who I am outside of Carrington Holdings, she said. And I want the time to do it properly. You stepping down? No, she said. But I'm stepping away. For a little while. He leaned against the counter. That's a big deal. So is this, she said. Brayden folded his arms. You think this is going somewhere? I think it already has, she said. And I don't want to screw it up. The air between them shifted. He stepped closer, close enough to see the faint freckle beneath her eye. I don't care about your money, he said. I care that when you're here, you're real. You laugh without checking to see who's watching. You listen. You care. Her voice dropped. I haven't cared about anything in years. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know where this ends. I'm not some fantasy. I've got bills and headaches, and a 5-year-old who thinks glitter is a food group. She smiled. I'm not looking for a fantasy. I'm looking for something that feels like home. He reached for her hand. Then maybe, he said, you've already found it. She tangled her fingers with his. And for the first time since she walked into his life, he let himself believe this might be more than just a beautiful mistake. Rain streaked down the windows as Brayden flipped the close sign and shut the door behind the last customer. The cafe was quiet now, the hum of the espresso machine fading into silence. Warm light spilled across the floor, casting soft shadows on the chalkboard wall where Kinsey had drawn a lopsided sun earlier that morning. Callie was sitting at the counter, her elbows resting on the wormwood, watching him like she was memorizing every movement. Do you ever stop? She asked, her voice low. Brayden tossed a rag over his shoulder and leaned beside her. If I stop moving, I remember I haven't paid the electricity bill yet. Let me take care of that. You know my answer. She rolled her eyes, but there was no frustration in it, only affection. One of these days, I'm going to find a way to help without you noticing. He gave her a sideways glance. You already did. You helped me breathe. Callie looked down at her hands. I haven't told you everything. Brayden's body went still. What haven't you told me? She hesitated, then looked up, her gaze steady. My father left Carrington Holdings to me when I was 26. He didn't think I was ready, and he told me that repeatedly. The board didn't want me. The press didn't believe in me. I spent 3 years proving them wrong. And now, I don't know who I am without the fight. Brayden tilted his head. You're the woman who brought a unicorn bracelet to a 5-year-old and remembered she liked her milk warm. She smiled faintly. I want to matter to someone because of who I am, not what I own. You do. Callie's eyes searched his face. You haven't asked me once what I want. What do you want? I want a life that doesn't change when the markets do. I want a home that smells like cinnamon and coffee. I want to wake up next to someone who knows the difference between being alone and being lonely. Brayden reached for her hand, brushing his thumb along her knuckles. You want roots? She nodded. And I think I found them here. Hours later, after Kinsey had been picked up from her play date and tucked into bed, Brayden stood in the kitchen with Callie beside him, her sleeves rolled up as she helped him stir batter into a mixing bowl. She's going to lose her mind when she sees the cake, Callie said, peeking into the oven. She's been talking about it for weeks. Unicorns, sparkles, and strawberry icing. You're a good dad. I'm trying. Callie leaned against the counter, watching him frost cupcakes with a concentration that could rival a sculptor. What would you do if money wasn't a problem? He didn't answer right away. Then, I'd buy the space next door, knock out the wall, and build a bigger kitchen. Maybe add a kids' reading nook. Then I'd hire someone full-time, so I could actually take Kinsey to school instead of dropping her off late and apologizing to the teacher. Do it. I can't. Yes, you can. He looked at her, then sighed. I've built this place piece by piece. If something goes wrong, I can't afford to lose it. Callie took a breath. What if I bought the building? Brayden stilled. You're serious? I wouldn't touch the business. I'd just be your landlord. You'd pay a fair rent. Nothing changes except that someone who actually cares about this place owns the walls. You'd be doing it for me. I'd be doing it for us. He stepped closer. You sure you want this? I've had 100 offers for things that don't mean anything. This? This means something. The next morning, the cafe buzzed with balloons, streamers, and a table covered in glittery cupcakes. Kinsey bounced between chairs in a pink cape, shouting instructions to her royal court of stuffed animals while parents sipped coffee and snapped photos. Brayden stood behind the counter, watching her with quiet pride. Callie appeared beside him in jeans and a pale blue blouse, holding a small gift bag. Is now a good time? He nodded, and she walked over to Kinsey, kneeling down. I made you something, she said, handing over the bag. Kinsey opened it and gasped. Inside was a silver necklace with a tiny unicorn charm. I love it, she squealed, throwing her arms around Callie. Brayden's heart tightened. Later, after the last guest had left, and the cafe was back to its usual calm, he walked her to the corner table. I've been thinking, he said. Callie raised an eyebrow. That's dangerous. I want to try, he said. Really try. Not just coffee and quiet mornings. I mean, life. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. I know it's messy, he continued. I've got a daughter, a business, and a mountain of responsibility. But I've also got room for you. Callie blinked, the emotion in her eyes sharp and sudden. Are you asking me to stay? I'm asking you if you want to build something with me. Something real. She didn't answer with words. She leaned in and kissed him, slow and certain, like she'd already decided days ago. When they pulled apart, she whispered, yes. 3 months later, the cafe had a new name painted in delicate script across the window, Wells and Carrington. Inside, the walls had been repainted, the counter refinished, and a cozy children's corner lined with books and beanbags sat where the dusty storage shelf used to be. But the most important change? Brayden, standing behind the counter in a clean apron, pouring coffee with one hand and holding Callie's fingers with the other. Outside, Kinsey skipped down the sidewalk, her unicorn necklace bouncing against her chest as she waved at every passerby. They weren't perfect, but they were whole. And for the first time, Brayden didn't feel like he was drowning. He'd opened his store early for a stranger, and somewhere between the coffee, the conversations, and the quiet moments that followed, he'd found the love of his life. Rain tapped softly against the window panes as Brayden adjusted the cuffs on his navy button-down, the fabric still crisp from the dry cleaners. The cafe was closed, its chairs stacked and lights dimmed, but tonight wasn't about pastries or espresso. It was about her. Callie was standing in the center of the room, turning slowly in a dress the color of champagne, the fabric catching the low light like moonlight on still water. She seemed unsure of herself, which was rare. Not because of the way the dress fit like it had been made for her, but because of the reason she was wearing it. "You don't have to do this," Brayden said, stepping closer. Callie looked over her shoulder. "I want to." He watched her for a moment, then reached for her hand, lifting it to his lips. "I've never brought anyone to this gala," she said quietly. "Not even when I was supposed to. It always felt like a performance. But tonight, I want to walk in with someone who reminds me that I'm not just a title." "You sure the Carrington board won't faint when they see me in a suit I borrowed from my neighbor?" She smiled different from before. Softer. "They'll be too busy wondering how I look this happy." They left the cafe as the car pulled up a sleek black sedan with a driver she greeted by name. The city swept past in golden streaks, but Brayden didn't look at the skyline. He watched her. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers glittered like frozen stars above a sea of gowns and tuxedos. Waiters moved through the crowd with silver trays balanced on gloved hands. Conversations hummed like static, and the room smelled faintly of roses and expensive perfume. Callie slipped her fingers through his. "You okay? I've made coffee for a mayor, changed a diaper in a moving car, and once ran a bake sale while holding a fevered toddler. I think I'll manage." She laughed, the sound drawing the attention of a few nearby guests. But for once, she didn't care. She rested her head near his shoulder as they stepped into the crowd. Introductions came fast. Faces with practiced smiles, hands that lingered too long in hers, questions wrapped in compliments. Brayden kept his answers light, his presence steady. But what struck him most wasn't the opulence, it was the way Callie moved through it with grace, yet never let go of his hand. He watched her turn down a conversation with a venture capitalist to ask him if he wanted another drink. He watched her excuse herself from a woman discussing quarterly projections to lean into him and whisper, "The shrimp have names. I can't eat anything with a name tag." Later, as the lights dimmed for the formal address, Callie guided him toward a quieter alcove behind a velvet curtain. She exhaled, then looked up at him. "I used to think this was everything," she said. "The power, the influence, the way people looked at me when I walked into a room. But now, the only thing that matters is how I feel walking out of one with you." He didn't reply with words. He kissed her, slow and certain, his hand resting at the side of her face. For the first time in years, she wasn't surrounded by admiration that felt empty. She was surrounded by love, and that made all the difference. The next morning, Brayden stood on the back patio of the cafe, where the new herb garden was already sprouting bursts of color. Callie emerged from the back door, barefoot in one of his old flannel shirts, holding 2 mugs. She handed him one and curled into his side. "Didn't think galas would lead to mornings like this. You always this domestic after a night with shrimp and hedge fund billionaires?" "Only when the man I'm with makes better coffee than the Met." He laughed, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. She tilted her face up. "I've been thinking about something. That always leads to trouble. I want to stay." He turned toward her. Here. Not just in the cafe, not just in this city. In this life. With you. With Kinsey. I want to be part of it all." His smile faded into something more serious, more tender. "Then stay. I mean really stay. Not just visits and drop-ins. I want to build something with you. I want a key to your place. I want to fold laundry and argue over takeout, and show up at school plays with glitter on my coat." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I was going to wait, but now seems right." She blinked as he handed it to her. Inside was a simple drawing, Kinsey's handprint in paint, with a heart drawn in the center and a crayon sentence that read, "Will you be my forever, Callie?" Callie's voice caught. "You asked her to—" "No," he said quietly. "She asked me." Tears filled her eyes. "I want you to be here," he said. "Not just for me, but for her. You already feel like home." She nodded, unable to speak. Then she wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. Weeks later, the cafe reopened with its new extension. The walls were brighter, the kitchen doubled in size, and the kids' corner had become a favorite among the neighborhood parents. Kinsey read stories to younger children on Saturdays and wore her necklace like a badge of honor. Callie worked beside Brayden 3 days a week, splitting her time between mentoring a new leadership team at Carrington Holdings and filling pastry baskets with her sleeves rolled up and flour on her cheek. She'd traded boardrooms for breakfast shifts, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she'd given something up. She felt like she'd come home. One evening, after the cafe closed and the last light was turned off, Brayden led her up to the rooftop. A table sat in the center, candles flickering, a blanket draped over the chairs. Jazz floated softly from a speaker, and the skyline blinked in the distance. "This is new," she said, stepping into his arms. "Thought you deserved a night off. No customers. No shareholders. Just us." She leaned into him, eyes shining. "This is perfect." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "I didn't want to ask you in front of a crowd," he said, "or on some island. I wanted to ask you where we started, where everything changed." He opened the box. Inside was a delicate gold ring, simple and elegant, with a small diamond nestled in a moon-shaped setting. "I don't have a fortune, but I have a daughter who adores you, a business that's finally breathing, and a heart that's never loved anyone like this." Callie's hands trembled as she touched the ring. "Will you marry me?" he asked. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes. Yes. 100 times, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and she looked up at him like he was the only man in the world. Because to her, he was. They danced under the stars, no music but the sound of the city and the beat of two hearts finding their rhythm. And as the night wrapped around them, warm and safe, they knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything they never knew they needed. A life made not from perfection, but from love, the kind that shows up early, brings coffee, and stays when it matters most.